Hi, I'm George Magklaras and I'm going to demonstrate the basic Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 server installation. I'm sitting here on Fedora's 19 environment. For the purposes of this demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a VM. So let's go ahead and do that. Before actually I do that, I just want to say that I've already downloaded the RHEL 7 binary DVD image from the customer portal. So I've logged in now with my portal account and I went to downloads, chose Enterprise Linux 7, and the image that I normally use for a classical installation is a RHEL 7 binary DVD image, approximately 3.49 gigabytes. So I've saved this image somewhere where I have plenty of space to download ISO images and also have the images of my virtual machines. So let's get started. I'm going to make a new RHEL 7 machine called RHEL 7 demo. I'm going to use, of course, the image I've just downloaded, which can be found, let's see where it is. It's actually here, RHEL 7 x86-64 DVD ISO. So choose volume. The OS type is of course Linux and Fedora 19. I choose Fedora 19 here since it's the closest thing that I have out of my options. Since RHEL 7 is really based on Fedora 19 and the upstream 3.10 kernel. So forward. I'm gonna make approximately a system with 2 gigs of RAM and a couple of cores. That should be sufficient for the purposes of this demonstration. And at this stage we also need to make a virtual disk image, so that's going to be the hard disk of our demo operating system. I'm going to make a new volume here called RHEL 7 demo.image, selecting the kcow2 image and clicking finish for about 8 gigs. There it is here. That should be perfectly sufficient for the purposes of this demonstration as well. So choose volume, forward. One last detail here is the default network NAT settings that the virtual machine should have. It should be okay, so let's go ahead and click finish. And if I maximize the screen here, this is the first screen that you're going to see. Typically you would see this after booting the DVD and clicking enter. Okay, what we see here is that by default the boot image will attempt to check the media. This is the default behavior. I'm going to press escape and abort the check here because I've actually ensured that the image is downloaded properly and that we have no problems. So the system will then attempt to boot into the Anaconda installer. And here comes our first image, which of course is the language selection. Continue with English. And this is what I call in my blog the central installation screen. So instead of the older serial wizards that you had in RHEL 5 and RHEL 6, what you have now is a screen where you actually set asynchronously a number of options here. Localization options, of course, your keyboard setting. Since I'm based in Oslo, I'm going to choose a Norwegian keyboard. So let's have a look. Norwegian and add. So if I choose that and then I click on some keys that are specific from the Norwegian keyboard to see if it's working okay. So there we go, it's working okay. So I click done. I'm also based in the Oslo time zone, so I select that and then again done. Notice that the done button, contrary to what you might have used before, is now located on the top left corner. And installation source is local media. Of course, it's the Red Hat image that we downloaded. Software selection. I'm going to select, for the purposes of this demonstration, a server with a graphical user interface. So there it is. And on the right hand side here, you have also more options, software installation options. So you can select packages, specific packages like the DNS name server package, a directory server, an email server. I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to do a plain bare installation. So we click done. And notice the exclamation marks here. What these two indicate is that the system was busy, in this case, checking software dependencies. The exclamation mark in general means that you should click on the actual field where it presents the exclamation mark, because it requires attention. So let's click on system here. This is the partitioning screen, and you can see here that the VirtIO block device, the virtual disk, is pre-selected. If you have a need to do your own partitioning or follow a specific partitioning scheme, this is the option you should choose. But now, for the purposes of speeding up the demonstration, I'm going to choose the default automatically configure partitioning option. The option here, encrypt my data, should be really a good option for choosing when you install something on a mobile device like a laptop, for example. So let's proceed, clicking on done here. At this point we see no further exclamation mark, so that means that we should be all set to click on begin installation. And if we do that, we see the system trying to create the partitions, the necessary partitions as dictated by the automatic partitioning option. A couple of things that we need to set here, final things, is the root password of the system. So I'm going to choose just a trivial password for the super user account. This is something you should never do in a production system, of course. You should select a cryptographically strong password. And because my password is weak, I will need to press twice done here. User creation, ordinary user creation, it's good to do that now. We can select this user to become administrator as well and have sudo rights. So once again, I have to set up the password. The passwords have to match, and they do in this case, and we click done twice. So that's it. That's all it takes to do a classical basic installation on RHEL 7. What you need to do now is wait until all the packages are installed. Right, I've speeded up the presentation here up to the point where the package installation has finished. This is what the screen looks like. You should see here a confirmation message that your system has now successfully been installed. So at that point you should click reboot. And the system will actually boot for the first time in the default kernel of MIPO 7.0. One typical thing that happens at first boot is that you have to, of course, acknowledge the license agreement. So you click into the exclamation mark, as we said before. You read the license agreement, or you don't. And then you click that I accept the license agreement, and done. we finish the configuration here. Kdump, you don't need to have this, we don't need to enable this in this particular case, so click forward and yes, and at that point you get the option of subscribing the management, subscribing to the Red Hat network so that you can receive a system entitlement and you can make sure that you get the relevant updates for your system. I choose to do that at a later time, and we click finish to go into one more reboot. There we go. And you should notice also the speed of reboot. This is of course a minimal server installation, but it's in comparison to previous versions of Red Hat Linux, Enterprise Linux, quite speedier. So I'll try to sign in for the first time with my username and password. Oops, I typed it wrong here. If you type it wrong, then it also informs you of the failed login. And just verifying again some localization settings here. You select the default input source to be the Norwegian keyboard, and that's it. Voila, your first Red Hat Enterprise Linux server is up and running.